Phil Fails! Whoa, Phil Fails! Welcome to Phil Fails. My name is Philip Jones, and today my guest is Carly Fischer. She's a business owner and a tarot reader. Wave to everybody, Carly.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here with you today and Phil Fails at Tarot. That's what we're going to do. Phil's going to fail at Tarot today, and Carly Fischer's is going to be my guide. We start out these interviews with Phil Fails 5 questions. So I'll ask you 5 questions. And one thing I'll preface, and I do this pretty regularly, is restructuring how you think of failure, at least within the context of these questions. Oftentimes the binary, at least as I was raised, or I perceived it in culture, was success on one side and failure on the other. And success is like what you show the world, kind of a destination, a place you want to get to. And then on the other side was failure is like what you hide from the world, what you don't show, and what you kind of like fear. You like don't ever want to have that. And the reframe that I'm working with is where success is kind of a direction on one side. It's not a destination. It's maybe it's a feeling inside of going the right direction, or a feeling of attaining some level of proficiency. But it's moving. As soon as you have that feeling, it vanishes after a meal, and you're going towards the next level of proficiency. And on the other side is not failure at all. It's not doing. It's either like not starting or discontinuing the journey, like not doing, and having a direction that you feel like is the way, feeling like you've got a way forward. And everything in between there is failure, synonymous with learning or wayfinding. So when I ask you questions about, Phil Fails 5 questions, it's about, I've mentioned it as the Fool's Journey, which is great that I would talk to a tarot reader about the Fool's Journey.
A series of experiences that help you grow.
Yeah. So are you ready for the 5 questions?
Let's do them.
Okay. Ooh, you know what? I think the first question should be about the Fool's Journey. I've got a professional tarot reader here. Why not ask about the 0 card in the deck? The Fool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you think of when you think of the Fool, and how do you see that play out in your life as a business owner? What does it mean to be a fool? What does it mean to have a fool's journey?
The Fool is the beginner's mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's the state of feeling fulfilled and being empty at the same time. It's that circle that's complete and is empty, right? The 0. And so the character is often walking off a cliff. That only started about 300 years ago. There were different representations before that. But the message of the Fool coming off the cliff is that he's willing to take a risk and he trusts he'll figure things out. Maybe it's his chance to learn if he can really fly, and he can. Maybe it's a very small drop. Maybe there's a ledge on the other side. He'll figure it out when he gets there. So it's the can-do attitude, and almost it's a naivety, but also a confidence. And so sometimes we would never really take a step out of our front door if we knew how dangerous the world was out there. We have to have a certain amount of ignorance to try something new. And so as a business owner, it's that ability to look at the world, even if you've hit a challenge or you're exhausted, or, you're going to try something again that turned out one way before, and now you're going to come at it a different angle now, and believe that it can work out this time.
Yeah. I've put this production thing as the Fool's Journey production because I've been doing software for like 10 years, and I want to take this Fool's Journey into interviewing and into creating content and creating an art form of exploring people and showing that. And it very much underpins, what I do. And even the name, the Phil Fails, it's this idea of courageously moving through fumbles.
So the next time you write the word fool, are you going to spell it with a PH?
I thought about that.
I know you did. How could you not? It's a perfect fit.
And fall.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the phrase falling forward?
Yes.
Yeah, right? I mean, just a way to think about, you may fall, but you can still make a touchdown with a fall.
Yeah.
You can still make progress.
Yeah, fail fast, fail forward.
Endless possibilities for
And
you.
fail fine. Fail
Fully.
It's okay. Yeah, fail fully. They don't have to be F, but there's so many F words. Wait, we're not
Let's
going there.
fucking
Yeah. Let's fucking,
Sorry, I went there.
You're fine.
Now, the other thing that you might consider in relation to the Fool is that the character was designed to be movable. And so in some decks, the Fool is placed at the end, and other decks placed at the beginning. But originally, it was almost like a game piece that would move through the cards. And so if the Major Arcana is a series of experiences that I personally don't believe have to be chronological, you can, every time, you could be jumping into someone else's life experience and whatever their upward spiral is, a lesson they're learning at the time or stage of life they're in. And you're the Fool who's jumping in to learn about it. And then you can jump out and go into someone else's life in a different area. And you're just here to witness their journey.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I thought of the Fool as the character of the tarot deck. And
Yes.
that it is, you're walking through, yeah.
Representing us, the person on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Question 2. How would Phil fail at tarot? You want more clarification? Was that the look of give me more? Or did I make that up?
I've already heard a little bit about how you do tarot, and I think it's a beautiful, intuitive approach that you have.
Yeah.
And so I think that you're already doing it really well. The only way I think one could fail at tarot, and this isn't just you, is if they get guidance from the cards and then don't act on it. Because what is the purpose of good advice if it's not implemented? So that would be the only thing I would suggest.
Yeah. Is to not be influenced by
Yes.
what is revealed in the cards.
I meet a lot of people that are interested in tarot. They get all the decks. They do all the reading. Then they'll draw their own cards and do everything well in the interpretation. And then they close their journal. They put their cards away. And they kind of go on with their life without implementing that guidance, without making any changes. And as a reader myself, I'm really interested in helping people at that stage to make a change based on what they've discovered within themselves.
Yeah, we're going to explore this. That I feel excited with that. And I'll just share a little bit of how I do tarot. I have 2 books back there, 2 different tarot books. The books that explain all this stuff. And
Can I
I'll
ask
have,
which ones?
oh man, is it the Witchcraft? Oh man, I'll just go grab them.
Sure, yeah. I'm curious what your influences have been.
Yeah. Oh, I might edit this out, but might not.
Be right back after this brief commercial break. Brought to you by water.
You need more water?
No.
I use these 2 books, and I sit down, Learning Tarot, Joan Bunning, and Modern Witchcraft.
Cool.
Those are the 2 books I use, and I do a pull, and after I do a pull, whether it's a 3-card pull or a 4-card pull or whatever, I've rarely done elaborate ones. I have the books, and I look at, I remind myself the suits and what they mean, whether it's pentacles and what pentacles means, or whether it's swords and what that means. And I remind myself the numerology, if it's a number. I remind myself of a lot of those types of things, like numerology, the suits. And then I go to the card and I kind of put those together, and I think about how it relates to my life.
Mm-hmm.
And what parts of my life, or if I'm doing a reading for someone, I just ask them, what does this mean to you? Like, how does this relate to you? If it's past, present, future, how does this relate to how you perceive your past? And then I just want them to talk, to relate to the card and make sense of it in their own way. And as they do that, I just kind of like, well, not just kind of like, I guide them, I guess, through how what they're saying makes sense in relation to the card. And I never thought of it as what you just shared. I've never thought of it as a lesson that you then act upon leaving the reading. So there's a lot for me to learn here.
And I want to say as well that that's only my approach.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is completely valid. In a great therapy session, you can have that understanding, you can relate to a new idea, have that breakthrough, and it doesn't mean you have to do anything afterwards.
Yeah.
You just are. And that's also enough. But I'm interested in adding a what are you going to do about it as a way to hold yourself accountable for really practicing that and making it a real change. But I think, therapy is a little different than tarot. So maybe that's why I maintain that in my tarot practice.
Well, I think
these are great.
I get excited because it seems like yours is combining tarot with coaching. You're
Right.
kind of like, how can we build a path forward for you based on the influences and the insights of this experience of seeing your life in this way? You've almost unlocked a intuition or aligned your inner vision with this card. It revealed something. Why not act on it?
Exactly. Yeah. And you can do another reading to help you identify the actions or to help you consider what would that path look like. And I think that's a lot more fun than making predictions.
Yeah.
Because then you're plotting.
Yeah.
Just today, I had 2 clients that came in to do a reading because they want to start a business together. They've been best friends for a long time. Mm-hmm. And friends in business can be kind of tricky, right?
Yes.
And there's Esther Perel does a lot of work around founders and their relationships. It's a complex relationship sometimes. So we did readings about their relationships, how they work together, skills they can bring in, what their business can be in the stage of infancy, in adolescence, and in maturity, and then what the core value of their business is. And we used the tarot cards to discuss that. And they were on the same page about all of this. And it was amazing to see how these 2 complemented each other and we're building a business plan. And it was these 2 young women, they're moving into 2 different markets, but they're going to be working together from a distance, and they have a great setup going on. And it was just so fun to see them formulate this plan and for us to move the cards around to support them.
That's so cool.
Yeah. That's the type of work that just gives me more energy than I put into it.
Yeah.
That's how I know that we're doing good work.
Right. The answer to number 2, how do you fail, is to not be influenced by the reading, to not let it change you.
Exactly.
And to not implement those changes in your life. I love that. So how do you succeed at, like, when do you know that you've done a successful reading? Like, how do you know when, because I imagine as a tarot reader and business owner, like, sometimes you leave a reading thinking like, that might not have been, I don't feel do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you know when it's like, yeah, I've hit the bullseye on that one?
There's a spectrum of experiences I've had as a reader, identifying what's working and what's not working for someone, or what behaviors are going to allow this to be beneficial to someone. And so for a successful reading, what I notice is somebody is being active in the process. That's critical. Participation.
Engagement.
Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I need to make sure they're active and make sure that they're receptive. And there's things I do as a reader to give someone their best chance of being engaged and involved and like fully present. Typically I hear things like they're saying, oh my gosh, yes. Or like, I can see them processing inside. They recede and you can see that the wheels are turning inside, and I give them that time to process. And then I'll ask them a question and they'll come out with a response that only they could make about what their plan is or what their dream is or something like that. That's how I know it was successful. We got something turning in their head.
Yeah.
We opened up a pathway that had been closed when they came in.
Yeah.
Like a new way of thinking, a new set of resources became available, new opportunities were seen. So when I hear that, that's great. It's almost like my job isn't to give them an answer, it's to get their brain in motion.
I love this. It's like the aha moment.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like. Sometimes it's preceded by tears. It's a breakdown that then we like broke down the wall that was causing the block. And then once you have that release, then you have this opening to all these different pathways. And then our job is to figure out which pathway is most likely to be beneficial to you, like with the biggest win in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah.
And then we help you like plan that out. And I keep saying we because every single time I do a reading, I'm like on their team to the point that I am trying to look through their eyes. Like I noticed I just flipped into we because I imagined I was with a client right now.
That's deep empathy, right? That's empathy.
That's why I sit on the same side of a table as a client every time.
Yeah. And I imagine the first stage of that is rapport. Having rapport with a client, having a level of trust and intimacy.
My first step is always trust. That's the most critical to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really sensitive thing. It's a very valuable thing to earn from somebody.
Yeah.
And it's disturbed so quickly. Like one word can disturb trust.
Yeah, it's a vibe. It's yeah.
And I also work with people who are very sensitive and intuitive because if you're into tarot, you're probably more tuned into other people, right? You're willing to be self-reflective. And those are the people that are more likely to have been wounded
Yeah.
by individuals that overstepped boundaries before this person knew how to keep a boundary.
Yeah.
And maybe they've realized that, maybe they haven't, maybe they've healed, maybe they haven't. So when someone steps into my space and we're about to do a reading and I want it to be successful, I always love to offer them tea, provide a calm space, really ask, how are they doing? Give them space and let them make themselves comfortable. I mean, I have this whole mini checklist in my head of allowing a guest to come in and inhabit the space in their way and make them comfortable. And then I'll start building rapport through conversation.
Yeah.
Like it's many steps.
Let them settle. That makes sense.
Settle. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, question 4. How do you pronounce it? Okay, just let's get down to it. Is it tarot? Is it tarot? Is there a third way that I don't know about?
Do you know what it's not?
What is it not?
Tarot.
To rot.
I hear that a lot. They pronounce the T at the end.
Oh,
As long as you don't do that, you're golden.
tarot
No.
or tarot.
Yeah, I think they're both fine. So what I've noticed is a generational change.
Really?
People who have been introduced to tarot in the last 20, 30 years, they say tarot. People who are introduced to tarot in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they often say tarot.
Tarot.
And it's not wrong. I think it's potentially more English.
Yeah, tarot. It sounds a little aristocratic.
It does.
Tarot.
Yeah. And I think it's how they learn to say it. I don't think it's wrong. I mean, it's just an emphasis, right?
Yes.
It's not the wrong word.
Yeah.
I think as long as you don't pronounce the T at the end, we know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We're all on the same page.
Is there a etymology to the word?
Well, it's French.
It's a French word.
Do you know why we use the French word?
No.
Do you want a brief history of tarot?
I would love a brief history of tarot.
All right. There's deeper parts of tarot we can explore, which are so cool, including the first woman who ran for president. She was probably a tarot card reader.
Really?
But I won't dive into that unless you ask.
Okay.
So, do you want to guess how early on we believe cards existed? Like what century did cards first exist? Not just tarot cards. Any
cards, I'm into sleight of hand and card magic.
Did not know that.
So I've researched cards in general.
All right.
So cards are like the earliest game known to man. You used to the dead man's card, the hangman's card, the ace of spades. You have to stamp the tax stamp on it. You would be punishable by death if you made that ace by yourself.
Interesting.
The cards are at least the deck of cards, not tarot cards, but are one of the earliest game.
So what have you learned in your research?
Well,
in terms of like the oldest record we have.
oh my goodness, I don't know. I'm also memory is not my strong suit. So enlighten me. Yeah.
Okay. 600s China.
Wow.
That's our record right now. And obviously they're fragile, so maybe they did exist sooner.
Right.
There's always
And they
that
just
asterisk.
perished.
And we don't have a record.
Because it's...
Because paper, we think, came into existence as we, know it now, not papyrus, but paper in 100.
Mm-hmm.
And so cards came about as a game in the 600s. And then we have record of them with the Mamluk Sultanate, who were the Turkish rulers of Egypt in the 1200s and 1300s. So we see cards in Turkey and Egypt. They definitely moved there through trade routes.
Yeah.
And in Egypt, you start seeing some scrawls on the cards. And they were these aphorisms, these sayings that were wise, and they gave a little piece of advice or sometimes a warning, kind of like a Chinese fortune cookie. Mm-hmm. Some of the sayings would be a little bit mystical, and they didn't have a clear meaning. You had to interpret the meaning, right? But those were on these suited playing cards. And in 1370, trade routes took the cards into Europe through the port city of Venice, Italy.
Okay.
And we have a record of that because, of course, they came in through the port city and were marked. But it's also the first year we start seeing sermons being delivered that are saying to the working class, stop playing with cards. They're the devil's work. Ooh. You shouldn't be playing. You should be working. Right? And if the working class are being told to keep working, who is then allowed to play with cards?
The aristocrats.
Absolutely.
The monarch. Yeah.
Tale as old as time.
Right.
So the wealthier classes are having the time of their lives with cards, and the game they're playing is Taroki. Each deck has to be handmade. And so over the next few hundred years, each time decks are made, there's these unique qualities that people bring into it. And I'm sure the working class was doing this too, but the records we have are from these richer families that preserved their cards. And so we see Italian Renaissance characters.
This is the Marseille deck?
Not yet.
Okay.
That doesn't exist yet.
Really?
This game is called Taroki.
Okay. This isn't even... Okay.
Yeah, we're just in Italy right now.
Yeah.
And so we see an emperor and empress. We see a pope. I don't know if the fool was invented at this time, but we also see a pepesse. Have you ever heard of a female pope?
Mm-mm. This is the empress card?
No. We had an empress already, and then they added the pepesse.
Pepesse.
Have you ever heard of Pope Joan?
No.
Do you know who the Visconti Sforzas are?
Oh my goodness, there's so much for me to learn.
You got it right here. This is what I'm here for.
Yeah.
All right, so the Viscontis and the Sforzas were two very wealthy merchant families in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
They ran Italy. They were very powerful, I should say, as merchants. So the families married, and when they married, one of the families there had a tarot deck. So today, I'm sorry, not a tarot deck, a Taroki deck. Today it's known as the Visconti Sforza deck. Mm-hmm. And one of the early members of the Visconti family, they believe, became pope, and she was a woman. And so this is a legend in the family, but it was also a great, 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 great aunt in the 1300s. Wow. And so that family put her into the Taroki deck as the female pope. If you look into papal literature, they do acknowledge that there's rumors there was once a female pope. If she ever existed, she was certainly burned at the stake as a heretic. But they believe that this is why there's now that test that popes go through where they have to sit in a chair that is, there's like an empty hole in the seat of the chair. Mm-hmm. And there's like a test to make sure that the pope is a man.
They touch the bottom and stuff.
Yeah. They do a ball check.
Oh my God.
And so they believe that could be because they feared that a woman would try to come into that position of power, which is one of the meanings of that card today in the current form, which is no longer called the pepesse, but she can represent a woman in a position of power traditionally held by men. It's a very lesser known meaning, I would say like tertiary or fourth. Uh-huh. And she's kind of a feared part of the divine feminine. Can you guess what card she is today?
Well, I thought it was I thought it was the Empress.
It's the High Priestess.
The High Priestess, right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. And she's kind of considered at times to be more secretive, and she's a little bit more, some people can be more afraid of her. And that relates to this idea of the divine feminine, which in a lot of religions and cultures in the Eastern world, women are causes of destruction, but in a positive way, like Kali. Like we need destruction. So women can give life, give birth. They can also destroy, and we put those two together. But in Western religions, they can be split more. And so we have like the virgin whore complex, which we see in Christianity. And so we revere the life-giving qualities. And then there's other parts of being female that are very looked down upon and like pushed to the side and considered shameful and wrong. And so in our tarot, the Empress represents the life-giving qualities of the divine feminine. And then the High Priestess is kind of the dark feminine, which in our societies are often less appreciated. And so it's the part of your intuition and the internal things that are happening that are very powerful, but that other people may not know how to handle well. So coming back into the history lesson, this is when we see these interesting changes in the deck because people are bringing in family dogs, family crests, colors that are unique to their family. They would commission one deck to be made by artists and then pass that deck down to a daughter on her wedding day. And it would be a family heirloom. All right, so we have these Italian carnival characters coming into the deck. The cards are continuing to spread over the next few hundred years as well. And different regions become famous for their printing. There's new technology that's helping these cards come out faster.
Yeah.
Marseille, France, is one of the places that becomes very well known for their designs. There's different regions of France that are famous for their own unique decks. And that is in the 1600s where the Tarot de Marseille is made. Yeah. It takes 4 master artisans to create one card.
Wow.
Because you have somebody who makes the wood block, somebody who does the stamping, then somebody who does the coloring, and another who does the cutting.
Wow.
Right? And then there's, at that time, decks were not 78 cards, but they were certainly more than 52. But they were somewhere in there. Yeah. So you had your playing card deck, and then you have these characters. The reason why we had added those characters is because they were triomphe cards. And so... have you ever played bridge?
No, I haven't, but...
Nor have I. But Tarocchi was a game like bridge. The game still exists today. You can go to Italy and there are Tarocchi championships.
Wow.
You would probably love to learn the game. It's very complex. I think you'd enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so those triomphe cards kind of give you power to win the whole game. I don't know how it works, but they're really powerful when they come down.
Triomphe, it reminds me of a trump card.
That is the modern English
translation
name of it.
Triumph,
yeah. But we don't see that as much in tarot literature in the last 10 years because it has a different connotation now in our culture. Right?
Because of the Trump?
Former president.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but true. I mean, it has a different feel, and tarot readers aren't often fans of some of his mentalities. Right. There's a progressive... line that goes through tarot readers stretching back to the 1700s. Yeah. So we have the Tarot de Marseille in the 1600s, still a very popular deck. So this is where we see our first big evolution in cards. We have gameplay as our first branch, still exists today. And then we have this new divination. This is taking place in France. In the 1700s, our first published works about using cards for divination come into being in France. And they were, I'm sure other people were predicting futures with cards prior to that, but this is scholastically where we would drop the anchor of history, right?
Right.
So there's a few different men during this time who begin using these cards for prediction. They start making their own decks that are used specifically for divination. And then people like Eliphas Levi decide to teach theosophical lessons through the cards. Theosophical,
which means
I
would know
biblical.
Theological, but
theological. It's like almost biblical, spiritual, mystical lessons.
Gotcha.
Eliphas Levi was a man who was trained in seminary school and was about to take his vows, but then left last minute, and then moved to Paris and was involved in some salons, where he was introduced to a lot of different ideas, very progressive ideas about gender fluidity and identity, saying that we won't evolve as a species until we can equally honor the masculine and feminine parts of us and stop living in a gender binary.
It seems very appropriate for our current culture and what's going on now.
Yeah, and it proves how little progress we've made culturally, that was still a fight people were fighting back then.
Yeah.
It was still a topic that was kind of fringe.
Yeah.
And so Eliphas Levi works a lot of that philosophy specifically into his creation of the cards. By creation, I mean into his interpretations of the cards. And he starts to integrate the Hebrew letters, the zodiac. He adds the Platonic elements. And some of the 2 different writers prior to him had also integrated the zodiac and had integrated the Hebrew letters into the 22 major arcana, but he doubled down on it and he placed the cards within the Kabbalistic tree of life. He added the Platonic elements, just making it more complex.
When you say Platonic elements, what do you mean?
Plato's elements, or the 4 primary Greek elements, I guess.
Is that like earth, fire,
water, fire, air.
Gotcha. That's why each suit is related to a certain element. Gotcha.
And then he thought that we could teach these broader lessons. So some of his contemporaries were trying to predict the future. And he said, well, how about we teach people about forgiveness or resurrection or kind of these, I'm sorry, I keep bumping this microphone. Teaching people these larger lessons in life through the cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that takes us into the 1700s. In the mid 1800s, tarot gets really popular in the United States. Just to remind everybody, we have the Civil War in the 1860s, right? Then we have a major pandemic in the early 1900s, and then we have a World War I. And so there's a lot of grief and loss from the 1860s into the early 1900s. While that's happening, there's also major technical and scientific advancements. Darwin publishes Origin of Species, so people start to question their religious leaders about where did we come from. Radiometric testing is invented, and so people theorize how old the Earth is, and it may be older than what the Bible is saying. And we have the radio invented, and the telephone is being talked about. We're understanding new things about communication.
Yeah.
All of this is occurring while transatlantic travel is getting easier and more accessible. So people are traveling from the west to the east and vice versa. New ideas about reincarnation come into play. We think about life after death, our connection to God, the meaning of life in different ways. So when you pair this interest in communication with enormous grief and loss of loved ones, with these new ideas about life on the other side, what do people start wanting to do?
Communicate with the death.
Yes, sir. And who decides they can help you communicate with your dead brother?
Oh my God.
Someone who's a shady business owner who can do a little seance for you.
Cold reading.
Spiritualists. So spiritualism pops up in the late 1860s, starts up in New York with the Fox sisters. And then it catches on like wildfire because of all those qualities we just discussed.
Yeah.
So,
well, because there's a demand.
Because there's demand.
Folks want to talk to their dead relatives, and we've got these tools, and we got folks that want to give people what they want.
And Americans are entrepreneurs.
They're entrepreneurs.
Don't we know it?
Oh my goodness.
So, that's when we see the Ouija board invented. Tarot cards are really brought into more popular culture. There's a big interest. I mean, auditoriums are selling out with spiritualists putting on displays of spirit photography, ectoplasm, spirit cabinets.
Okay.
And if you've done any reading into this, it's so strange because you can read an account of what's happening and you're amazed by it. But then you see the pictures and you wonder how anybody believed this was real. Because the ectoplasm was often gauze that a woman would store in a compartment that only she had access to when seated. And when the lights were off and no one was looking, this gauze would come out and be above her head, right?
Yeah.
And it was supposed to look like a floating ectoplasm, but it was just fabric, you know? But people were fooled by it. And the rule was you can't leave the seance table. You would have to keep your hands down. Otherwise, if you break the circle, the spirit leaves.
Yeah, they made criteria for the event to occur that would keep them locked in.
Yeah.
So they could only see a certain angle, or they could only, they couldn't interact with the thing.
And so another fun trick is that table tilting, for instance.
Yeah.
The seance host would have a nail in the table that was very small and was just slightly lifted. And they'd have a ring on their finger with a little notch in it. And so when everyone put their hands down, she could click into place and she could levitate a table.
Pull up the table. Yeah.
So everyone was really curious about this because pretty soon some spiritualists are getting caught.
It was magic.
It was magic.
It was deception.
It was. So do you know who the best person was at identifying that deception?
Magicians.
Can you think of anyone in particular at that time?
I mean, I don't know. Houdini.
Yes.
Houdini, did he go around and it seems like I researched this. He would go and debunk.
Yep.
One of his big things was showing the fraud in these experiences.
Yes.
Because his mom had gotten taken by one of them or something like that.
She gave away her life savings to
Yeah.
try to connect to the dead brother.
Yeah.
Their dead brother. And he loved his mom. And so the thing is that once she passed, he truly wanted to find a way to connect to the other side. And so he was not motivated to embarrass others. He actually wanted to find somebody who was real. But he was a magician, so he knew the tricks that were happening. The people on his team were scientists because there is a magazine, I forgot which one it was. It wasn't the Wall Street Journal. No, it was Scientific American. They put out a call and said, if any spiritualist can really manifest a spirit and prove to us you can contact the other side, we'll give you $1,000 prize.
Yeah,
but
I
you
remember
have
that.
to
Yeah.
prove it to our team of physicists and chemists and scientists and Houdini, our magician. The scientists were baffled. And every single time Houdini said, I could do that same thing. And he would create the same circumstances and pull off the same trick, right? But at the end of the day, he truly wanted to find someone that could help him. So he wasn't just trying to be an asshole, I promise.
Yeah.
And I really have a crush on Houdini, by the way.
I love Houdini.
He's a very interesting guy.
Yeah.
So he would travel to Europe and be in the US and do this work. And something to be said for spiritualism is that at the time, it was one of the only ways women could make money and be financially independent. So for all the faults of spiritualism, it did help with the women's movement a lot.
Yeah.
Did you know at the time it was illegal for women to speak in public on a platform with a microphone?
Mm-mm.
So spiritualists found a loophole. They could get up on stage as an activist, political activist, or somebody running for office, like for president. They could say, I think we should abolish slavery, give women the right to vote, and allow free love, which to them meant we are allowed to remarry if our husband dies or if it was an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And by the way, my name is Sam, and I'm being channeled through this woman.
I see.
And that allowed them to get the word out and put their political movement forward.
They had to channel a man. So the first
And that disembodied man was allowed to speak.
through the woman. Like
Yeah.
the way the woman got to speak was by channeling a man. Oh, America.
Pretending she was just being used.
Oh, say, can you? Oh my God.
So we have to appreciate spiritualism for that at least.
Yeah.
But moving forward after that into the mid 1900s, we have like counterculture. And so that's when we see tarot coming out of this space of just being used with spirits, and instead it's being used for intellectual and creative purposes. Even the psychologist Carl Jung looked at tarot to better understand archetypes. And then in the 1980s, some psychologists in Berkeley wrote a book about integrating tarot into their clinical practice.
Yeah.
And so towards the end of that century, we really see it come into a more secular space. And so that's what I'm a student of. That's what I study, and that's what I'm furthering in the evolution of the work.
Yeah.
But all three of those branches exist, and they're all going in their own direction still.
Yeah. Okay. There's almost this fifth question that you answered, which was like, what is the history of tarot?
Great.
And I'm gonna
There
tell
we go.
you what I took from it. And the big swath was the first one was in China around 600. Is that what you're saying? The first one, kind of the card
record
games.
of
Cards.
suited playing cards.
Suited playing cards. And then there were through trade routes between China and Turkey, and they made their way to Europe. And then it started out in kind of Italy, and they had to be handmade. The family would have the cards. But this was after the religious folks were like, hey, lower class, y'all can't play those cards anymore. You got to clean the sewers or clean our chimneys or do things for us. And the only person that got to play with cards are the people, were the wealthy. And so they ended up having really cool decks that were handmade for them. And that's where we got the Popess, which was the first lady pope. And we also got a bunch of decks with with dogs and folks' uncle in them, and like,
Which is why in some decks, when you look at them, there might be some occult, esoteric reason given
Yeah.
for the image. But honestly, it could just be some leftover from a family heirloom
Yeah.
in the 1500s. Like, I just love knowing that. It might be really, really simple.
like Giuseppe's dog is in
yeah,
there.
it's just his favorite Dalmatian.
Yeah. And they're like, well, that means Satan's hounds are coming. Yeah, yeah.
It's
I
your
get
inner
you.
animal.
Yeah. And it's really just, Giuseppe. And then it went to France. And in France, we kind of had this religious type of infusion. Then we had the U.S. and this new kind of trade route, this what did you say, intercontinental travel. And the cards were coming over there, but also different ideas were getting traded back and forth. And we had a lot of technology and communication around the same time. We had a lot of loss and devastation. So people wanted to talk to the dead, which gave us spiritualism. And then you said there were 3 different kind of ways or 3 different pathways we have currently. This like non-secular. What are the 3 different ways do people look at tarot? Or
Well, there's card games.
Card
because
games.
you can read tarot with a deck of 52 playing
Yeah,
cards.
I've heard that.
And
Yeah.
that's what they use in Ukraine and Russia.
yeah,
So you have gameplay with
gameplay.
cards.
Yeah.
And you can play games with tarot decks. I've heard of several games, Taroki, for instance, you can use a modern playing card deck for, right? So there's gameplay with cards. Then there's divination. And then there's creative, psychological, intellectual use of cards.
Which is kind of therapy or
Could be.
psychology. This is more of the
Secular.
Carl Jung type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Psychology. Man, awesome. All right. This concludes the Phails 5 questions. And this is awesome.
You found quite the history along the way.
I'm telling you, right? I could have never planned that.
I love tarot so much, so if I'm ever rambling about it, you are welcome to interrupt me. Maybe we need like a secret symbol to be like, hey, move on.
If you're rambling about tarot, I think I'm doing my job well.
All right. Tarot's like the love of my life.
Oh.